thank you so much for being here for this talk, and thank you so much, Pi Gotham, for having me here to speak. This is definitely a different audience than I normally speak to, because I normally speak to audiences of software testers. But I work very closely in concert with software developers, and Sarah is actually the reason that I'm here today, because I built this little tool in order to help facilitate my work at Bitly, where I'm currently the lead software engineer in test. So today my talk will focus on using acceptance test-driven development in Python specifically, and I'm going to be focusing on a couple of different aspects of it. So first I'll be starting with how I got into Python, because it's a little bit strange for software testers to go into that realm, and why I needed Python in the first place, especially when Ruby is generally a more popular tool for acceptance test front-facing driven development. And then we're going to take a little detour to really clarify what acceptance testing is. Then we'll talk about where's the Python. We'll talk about the tool Behave, which is a wonderful, wonderful tool for front-end Python acceptance test-driven development. I'll talk about how I set it up using a page object model, which has helped me develop more maintainability and scalability, as I've generally been the only person actually building these tests in the organizations where I have implemented them. And finally, just a conclusion about myself and about the talk, with any questions that you may have in the time remaining. So, how did I start? Well, I was really interested when I first started transitioning into software tests. I was so interested in automating because I was really, really bored running login tests 100 times. Yes, I understand. Yes. I began my career as a software tester 3 years ago. Before that, I was a music educator for 10 years. So it was kind of shift. And I had very little, I had no programming experience, and I had experimented with Linux and music software prior to jumping into software tests. And when I found out that there was a way to get the boring stuff off of my plate, I was super psyched. But I had to find a way. So I found a free class. I went online, learned to program. Daunting. And I took one of the free online MOOCs offered by Rice University, and it was really hard for me. It was really, 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 really hard. I've done it twice, and I've learned something new and different each time that I've done it. So I'm not sure about how those of you in the room have approached or begun your programming careers and lives, but I feel that mine was somewhat atypical, and I've learned things perhaps in a different way, but in a way that has really helped me to approach the work that I needed to get done. So why did I need Python? There were shiny Rubies first to do test automation. Cucumber was built around Ruby, and everybody loved it. So great. Woo! And in fact, the first test job, even though I was learning Python, and I was really in the learning phase, the first job that I had in automation was in Ruby. So I learned Ruby too. Okay. Then when I moved to a Python shop, I said, listen, I've built this in Ruby. I've never built a full suite in Python. And they said, well, you can build it in Ruby, but we prefer if you built it in Python. And after 2 weeks of thinking about it, I thought, you know what, Jessica, you can do it in Ruby and be all by yourself, the only person in the room who can do Ruby. Or you can choose Python, which you know you're already interested in, and there are 15 people who you can go to for help and who can give you way more advanced techniques, such as using regular expressions, which is not advanced to many of you who program for a long time, but using regular expressions to match maybe different numerical values to compare charts to tables or other things that you might need on the front end, which you would perhaps evaluate in a back-end test, but you want to make sure it's showing up to the user in the same way that it's actually happening in the back end. And you would be surprised at the number of times that that is not accurate of coming from a software test point of view. So I needed a way to make sure that I could do more advanced things, and I needed to know that I would have the human resources and the human capital. So I chose Python, and then I said okay out loud, and oh crap, what tool am I going to use? So I began to research tools, and there are a few different acceptance test development tools in Python. I will talk more about the tool I chose in just a moment, and the tool I chose was Behave, which I happen to really love, and I will tell you why. And no, I'm not paid to love Behave, I just do. So our detour. What is ATDD, or Acceptance Test Driven Development? Developers are really used to hearing the words unit and integration. I've worked with a lot of development teams, and I've often found that integration tests are more often what happens in reality than what is defined. So yes, we understand that a unit test is on a single unit of code, and that an integration test is on 2 or more units of code combined together. Many organizations have some developers writing just unit tests on their code, some developers writing unit and integration tests, others who write a unit test for this, an integration test for that. I've worked with varying levels of organization around these terms, and sometimes a little lack of clarity. And then when I get to acceptance test, people freak out because they have no idea what I actually mean. So an acceptance test, unlike a unit and an integration test, does not test code. It does not care. Am I allowed to swear on this?
Sure, why not?
Okay. It does not care if you have written the shittiest code in multiple languages with horrible white space, extra brackets, comments under every line. If it works, that's all the acceptance test cares about, is what happens to the user. You can have the cleanest code, you can have the shittiest code, you can have somewhere between clean and shitty. Does not matter to the acceptance test. And as you will see, when I actually display a sample in action, you will notice that you'll notice what happens. And it's actually kind of really fun to watch if you've never seen it. And as a test developer, I love it because I can spot bugs faster. I will run acceptance tests 30 or 40 times a day because I'm developing them. This is very helpful to the, quote, non-developer who is developing. So this is something I use to help, but also when I watch the same thing happen 30 times, I can spot a blip instantly. I'll spot it before anybody else because nobody else is watching a login 30 times. It's not happening. So that's my deal. Nick, would you mind getting me a water? Thank you so much. My husband has been very supportive. He's getting me the water now, yes. Bravo. He deserves so much credit today. Acceptance test uses automation to interact with the platform through VDT tools like Cucumber and Behave, which superimpose a DSL or domain-specific language on top of the code. So meaning stuff you can read in English, which is super helpful for the product team, but if you structure your code base right, it's actually really helpful for the devs too, because they actually know what the hell is being tested here without having to dig in to all the files and read out, like if you use RSpec or something, or just like straight RSpec, straight nose, straight PyTest, straight PyTest, or any of these tools to try and integrate with with Selenium, you have test files that are very difficult to read because the name of the test or multiple tests is within one file, so you're kind of scrolling through, and it takes time, which means nobody's going to use it. This is the basic rule that I've learned in my short career as a software tester working with really anybody. If the tool takes a long time, I mean, who wants to waste their time looking through something? You want the answer, you want it now. So I want to structure tests in that way, and these tools allow that to happen. So, as I said before, where's the Python in this talk? Finally, she's getting to the Python. Behave was created to be written in Python. It is a tool that is extremely similar to Cucumber. I actually find it to be a little more streamlined than Cucumber. They're both open source tools. You can use them. You can put in, pull requests to their code bases. But I really enjoyed using Behave because between the streamlined nature of Python, which is understandable for me personally, that's my personal learning style, and the streamlined nature in which Behave was created, which I feel echoes the style of Python, it really just made acceptance test development kind of click in my head, and it's made it really enjoyable. So the remainder of the talk will be focusing on Behave and visual examples of how I've actually designed the tests, set up the code base, and have these tests running in production. This is the proof of concept that will be running in production. So it's just the beginning sign-in test that you'll be seeing today. So here's the web address for Behave, so you can go take a look at the tools. And on the website, they have really, I wrote good documentation. I should have written excellent documentation because the creators of Behave, I put in a pull request 2 weeks ago, and they made some upgrades to the tool since I had last used it. And so they pointed me very nicely to the upgrades. They gave me some great documentation. They outlined in the GitHub pull request some ways that I could use it. They're very active, and this was the person who created it. This wasn't, other users. This was the creator of Behave, the writer of the code, saying, oh, do this, look at this, check this out. So it's quite active, which is really nice to see in choosing an open source tool. Other Python-based tools like Lettuce is another one that people use because of the whole Cucumber situation. It's named Lettuce, but it has not had as much active development as Behave, at least when I did my research probably a year and a half ago in selecting the Python-based tool that I would be using. The comparison between the two in terms of active recent development, Behave was quite good. So I like that when I'm looking at an open source tool because I need answers, especially given that my development practice is coming from the software tester side, not the I write cool, awesome apps side. So we're going to take a look at Behave in action. Now what Behave actually does is take the DSL, and then beneath the DSL uses Python and the Selenium API to interact with the actual page objects. And Behave has built within it various capabilities for extensive flexibility in locating things like drop-down menus, extra pop-down windows, and other sometimes more tricky things to test when you're writing an automated interaction for a front-end user interface. The other nice thing about tools like Behave is that because they are written in Selenium, they can be ported over to tools like Appium, which work for mobile test development. So you can port over your feature files, which we'll talk about, and then you get some bang for your buck, and it works. It can be set up to work with native apps or web apps. And obviously there's a level of complication that one would expect. And this is something that I'm just researching at the moment. It's not something I've yet had the pleasure / terror of implementing, but it's nice to know that I'm developing something that can have use and growth, not only within the application for which I am building it, but outside of that application into the other kind of branches of that application. So I do enjoy that aspect of writing within this style. So let's see it in action. So I'm going to drag over my command line, and right now I'm within the code base where I've set up, which I'll show you in a moment. So just going to go over here, type behave. When I type behave, some windows pop up and things start happening. Okay, so, and these happen automatically. So instead of my manual testing time being taken up by signing in and making sure the login page pops up, or making sure the login page doesn't pop, isn't popping up something when it shouldn't, I can create, there are 4 test cases happening at this moment. So I will get from these 4 test cases the individual reports for each test case. I will get a stack trace on scenarios. So let's go through what I have, and then how the hell did I get this? Okay, this is what, to me, as a software test developer, makes it great, because I can learn development and better techniques and ask better questions as I am building for the software. So that I feel that there's a very nice life cycle for the, sort of the programmer like myself who's not going to lifelong programmer, who's not a computer science major. I'm a violinist, okay? So there's some differences in background, but these tools really help. So here's where I typed behave. I get the scenario that I wrote. When the test doesn't work, this happens. So, and this was written for sample purposes, so I wrote it to be broken on purpose. Then a page object is gone. So I have my stack trace here, and it tells me that there's a timeout in the stack trace, because wait until acceptance of element presence located by, I hope that's not in the code base, because if it is, well, I mean, it'd be, like, ha ha ha, but no, probably should not be in our professional code base. This failed, and it should have failed, because it was looking for something that was not there. So I wrote this as a display of, this is what happens when it fails. You get a really nice detailed stack trace, and it brings you back to every single file from the library from which you used it in Python, the library where you are in behave, all the way down to the pieces that I wrote, and what happened in Firefox when it flipped. Said, I can't find it, sorry. Then when it's happy, everything's green, everything's a go. You're good. Then I am in Wonderland, and it's yellow. What the hell? Well, when I scroll down past my working steps, it says, you wrote when I am Wonderland. You didn't actually say what you wanted. You just wrote the step. And you'll see what that looks like in a moment. But the message tells me, oh, you didn't do it. Here's what you need for your basic beginning implementation. So here you go. And it just gives me the decorator at then, the I am in Wonderland, which is what I named the step in the DSL, and then it tells me, please write a function that implements the step. And then gives me just that little bit to remind me, you didn't finish it, this is why it's not working. So within, and it also gives me, it took 25 seconds. So I tested 4 scenarios in 25 seconds, and if I didn't have to explain everything out to somebody, basically within a minute, I tested 4 different login scenarios. Done. While I'm doing something else, or while I'm scanning the different windows, because I have the, Star Wars set up with like the multi-monitor situation, like 3 of them. I'm like the only person who has 3 monitors going. They're like, really need this? Talk to me. Yes, I really need this. So I have that, set up, and I can have often I will have the browsers running in one window while I'm watching the code in another, while I'm watching the hip chat in another, so I can kind of monitor everything that's going on and put in the things that I need from developers. So to me, this has been such a help, just to have this feedback as I am developing a test. Because I can see as I'm developing, did I make a mistake? Or is there something wrong while I'm writing this test? Not even putting it into the code base, but am I writing a test against something that's broken? And so, this helps me find things, communicate with developers as I am developing my own work. So in Behave, we have the feature test, and we'll talk about the broken test sample feature. So this is the DSL situation. So your project managers, if you can get them into using, given when then, they can theoretically write out their acceptance criteria for you. And it's not going to be perfect. So just, chuck that out the window. But it's a mindset that one can help to adapt within an organization. It also helps every .feature is a test. Every file that appended .feature, you can open anything under the features folder, anything that's labeled .feature is a test. So if you want to see what is being tested in your application at the user acceptance level, you click open a feature file. And if they're named well and organized well, you can quickly scan within maybe 2 minutes. Oh, okay, she's testing a broken test on purpose. She's testing to log in from the sign-in page. Oh, now she's testing the sample login. Now she's testing the incomplete steps feature. They're all there. They're all written in English, and Behave also ports to 26 or 27 languages, like not computer languages, like spoken languages. So that makes this tool really great to use because you can use Python in many native languages and achieve these same results. So you'll notice that the given when then happens feature scenario, given when then. Yes, this is kind of the basic deal with Behave. So when you go in, you are taking a look at, you have a features folder, and then pretty much all the subfolders live under there, your environment settings, your home settings, any other files that you want to do to set up environments such as, okay, we have a QA environment. So when I write this command line command, I want it to test against QA. When I enter, dash blank, I want it to test against this URL, which is production. When I enter dash blank against this URL, that's staging. So you have a way to set up users, you have a way to set up environments, and really customize the tool for maximum usability and flexibility, which is great for your developers, but also great for it's great for product, but it's really helpful when somebody can just copy and paste a command line command and use some tags. If there's one page that says, run these tests, to run login tests, copy, paste, enter, done. And I've had developers who've actually installed this and use this in their development workflow when they're working on the front end, before they even check in code to be run against Jenkins or whatever, to run any of the unit tests. They've actually run it just to make sure they haven't borked any major stuff on the front end. And so I've seen it help developers who want to use it and find it simple to use through design. I've seen it really help developers feel confident about the work that they're checking in, or more confident about the work that they're checking in, which is a cool feeling as a software test engineer, because I'm not at that level, but it's neat to help people who are. I really enjoy that very much. So in the steps, you have the login sample steps. So every step that I created for this login, all of the English now becomes Python. Enter Python. So your step decorators, given when, then, are recognized and they know what to do with themselves. Given knows what to do, then knows what to do, when knows what to do, and when you have your English string, and then how it is implemented, and in behave they always use step implement and then context. And the context actually pulls from the environment file, which sets up browser and sets up other pieces of the environment, which can be also customized. Selenium likes Firefox. It's Selenium Firefox, but that can be customized. It has compatibility for every browser, depending on what you are running it against. This is against my local machine, so if I changed it to Chrome, it would run Chrome. If you're running it against Chromium on CentOS, it's a little hard to set up, so there are some big issues, but barring those types of things, which great DevOps and great devs are always really, have always been happy to help out with, it can become a really flexible tool for testing cross-browser and firing up multiple machines, multiple Selenium machines, to farm out different tests across different VMs, and then you increase your speed of the test.
You have two different definitions for add then. You have add then up in the middle and add then, two different definitions, two different functions, right? Is that they override each other, or how does it work?
Wait, can you not,
The third one, add then, and then one at the bottom, add then.
Yeah, yes. Multiple step decorators, the step decorator copies the English file. So if I go here, then I am in Wonderland. If I go here, then I should be in my Bitly dashboard. I could have 100 app-thens. I could have 1,000. App-then is just what lets, what takes it from behave and translates it over to Python, basically. So I could have 100, as long as the string is different. If I had at then, I am Jessica, at then, I am Jessica, and I try to write two of those in the same file or in two different files, an error actually pops up and says, you have the same step twice. So you can't write the same English string or the same string with the same decorator. That cannot be done. But you can write any different string, any variation of a string, with the same decorator, because those three decorators are the only decorators that are used in behave. Thank you for that question, though. That's important to note for sure. Okay. So, yes?
Can you do multiple givens? Or do you have to write a different given with the different combinations?
You can do a background step, which I did not do for this proof of concept, but there's another thing called background, where you can set a given statement and set up all the things that you want in a given statement, and then go through, scenario. So maybe your login is the same, and then when I click the first thing, when I click the second thing, when I click the third thing, and you can do all of that without having to continue to re-log in, or continue to say, given I log in, then I click, given my login, then I click that. You can take that all to something called a background. And I didn't go into that here, but it exists, and it's a great time saver, great helper in terms of making your, taking your code and keeping it nice and dry, which is helpful. So, I have these steps, and you see that I have this home module hanging out here, and it's kind of doing a lot of the heavy lifting. And why? And most of you probably know. This took me some time, okay? This whole module, like the magic of modules, I was like, wait, excuse me? Like, excuse me? I can just write this all in one place, and it's so much easier. When you are not a natural born programmer, it is not that easy. It kind of blew my mind. Mind blown, modules exist, Jessica's life is amazing. So, so this is where we kind of come into my decision to attempt, and anybody can feel free to come up to me and say, really, but try to do it after, because, still attempting. So I attempted to implement a page object model, so that way that beneath that step definition layer where you saw the home module being used, you can actually have the interaction with the Selenium. That's where the Selenium lives, and that's where each discrete object on the page lives. And trying to make it discrete as possible means that when a developer changes the color of something and I'm looking for the color, maybe I'm depending on the color to be blue. It's the only thing that's different, and that actually happens a lot, where there's one thing that's different on 6 pages, and it's the color. And I'm like, really? You can't throw me an ID? No. Okay. So that's the different thing, and then it changes. Test. And so, part of the point of the test is to say, is that dying because it should be dying? Everybody asks, well, is it the test or is it the code? It's my job to look very quickly and say, something changed. This is what, here's the stack trace, you figure it out, or whoops, I wrote that wrong, I will fix it now. I'm so sorry. So that's why I like the detailed stack trace. But taking those page objects and getting those elements and actually grabbing them from the page, looking for specific things, helps me when something changes, I change it in one place. So if I have the header object, and they change the color from blue to orange, and I'm looking for blue, they change it to orange, I'm like, dude, you changed it to orange. Go into my header, orange, save, commit, done. Test fixed. And everywhere the header object lives, done. So it's nice, dry, reusable code that's easy to maintain, especially if you're the only QA person in an organization when you have other things to do aside from actually, writing automation, the other responsibilities. So what that kind of looks like is, here's my home function. So here's where your Selenium situation comes in, and this is Selenium Python with a Python wrapper, Selenium with a Java wrapper, with a Ruby wrapper. It looks different. I personally kind of really hate it with Ruby. I just do. Nothing against Ruby, I've worked with both. I really enjoy the Python a lot better, I understand it better. So, sign in. I have to tell it what to do with every element. I have to take into consideration how long pages take to load where I'm testing this. So if I'm testing this against the Office internet server and on one day it's particularly slow, I might have to change this number just to know. There are implicit weights and explicit weights, so I can change those different kinds of weights. So an implicit weight is, it is implied that you will wait X amount of time. That's in your environment file. Like, that's a higher level you know, no matter what happens, we'll wait 5 seconds. The explicit wait is you tell us how long to wait. Tell us 20 seconds, tell us 30 seconds. You write it in the code. So you have those 2 different kinds of waits. And then I'm so excited, okay, I say wait. And then I say, can you wait for the element to be clickable by this CSS selector? Or can you wait until it's clickable? And then there's some funny tweaks and stuff like that, which you figure out as you write it, and I don't need to share them here, but there are some tweaks. Then you have that for each function that I have put into that module. So when I go back to my steps, I can grab those, and instead of having all of that code here, I just have a clean enter user, click sign in. So even that part is clear to the lesser experienced programmer, which is nice for people who are trying to figure out what's going on, or for programmers who don't want to take the time to dig in because they don't have that time. And I understand that. It's my job to make this simple, or as simple as possible, as clean as possible. So this is the setup that is typically used, or that has been successfully used, and I've used it successfully in 2 organizations so far. I've been really happy with my ability to make changes to that setup. And so, in conclusion, this has really been the bulk of my experience with Python. I do exercises, I do things online to try and work out my skills, but I am a software tester, and so my work with Python is this work with Python. And I am always learning, I'm always researching, listening to, you know, Dr. Chuck's podcast and reading books, and there are all kinds of beginning learning resources out there, and I'm always trying to get different perceptions on concepts. And I consider myself rather junior. I have a lot to go, a lot to learn, but I enjoy it. And what I hope is that this talk helped you to learn about how you can encourage testers in your organizations to consider using Python for some of these more repetitive manual tasks, especially if you are a Python-based organization, or if you have personal projects that have a lot of front-end facing. You can take a look at this tool and probably pretty quickly with Selenium API whip up some quick tests on your own personal projects. So that is what I have to share, and if you have any questions, please feel free. I think we have some. Do we have some time for questions?
Yeah.
Great.
Do me a favor, just repeat the question so it gets recorded in your mic, if you don't mind.
Which question?
Whoever asked the question.
Oh, sure. I'm like, which one? I didn't ask them yet. Hi. Sure.
So you did mention it earlier that you could swap out whatever WebDriver you want using Behave and Selenium. That's actually something our company has had some issues with. You get different results depending on what WebDriver you use. Like
Well, yeah.
Chrome moves faster than Damage.js, and like Mozilla does things differently. I was wondering, like, the way we sort of dealt with it is to basically write different steps depending on what WebDriver you're using. I was wondering, like, in your experience, how you dealt with that, and how you organized like that to deal with the sort of different nuances of each WebDriver.
Sure. That's a great question because it's a difficult question in organizations, and it's one I've dealt with a lot. So the question is, how do you deal with the nuances in the different web drivers that exist to drive your tests? When I had a team in Uruguay that I was working with, their tests worked, but they would only test on one browser. I ran the test on all 3 browsers. And I was writing some of the tests. They were really advanced programmers who just got stuck on QA, so I gave them the significantly more mathematically challenging test because I'm nice like that. And they would run them on Chrome and they'd say, oh, they work. And then I'd run them on Firefox and IE and say, no, they don't. And I said, we can't commit this code until it works on all 3. Figure out how. And that was my motto too. I wasn't like, well, you guys figure it out. I'm gonna just, kick back and have a margarita. And the way that I really worked that out was working with things like, oftentimes I've found that IE is a really hard time with XPath. Yeah, these are the tweaks. IE is a super hard time with XPath. I refuse to use XPath unless it's absolutely, if there is no other way. Developer, can I not buy you a bottle of scotch so you will write me an ID? Or a different CSS selector? Or, anything you want, just not XPath, because it doesn't work in IE. And so, in an organization that does not depend on IE, I don't care. Because I don't need it. It's not of business value if only 2% of my users are using IE. Then I don't care. But if 25% of my users are on IE, I kind of need to care, right? So I cajole, that I personally said, okay, what can we do about this? Here is the problem. It doesn't work. If you would like a test that works and actually tests, this is what we need to do. How are we going to solve it? We can either not run the test, we can mark it as broken, and have a broken test in a test suite, which is entirely pointless from a software tester's point of view, or we can change the way that we are doing this so that it will work. So cooperation and writing development code has been really key in getting test code, because when you start writing different steps for different browsers, your code starts to get messy, because then you've got to change you've got to change different things for different browsers. If one element changes, but it's different in 3 different browsers, your test, I don't know if you're a software tester or who's writing or if you're developing those tests, but it's more maintenance, basically. It's more tech debt. So the way I dealt with it has been by being a bitch. Next question. Yes?
Have you used any other application, UI applications, like other than website, like this we have?
I've used Cucumber, basically.
No, what I mean is that have you used, we have this tool in an application other than website application? Let's say I want to test an application, UI application, but it's not a website. It's a company-built application with maybe .NET framework or maybe another smart client application.
I have not, and I do not know if it has the capability, to be perfectly
It
honest.
won't work.
I think because it relies on Selenium.
Right,
Yeah.
because, the underlying technology is
web-based.
making a web browser, so trying to run it against a desktop app just isn't going to work.
Which is too bad, because it's super useful, right? I've had a lot of people ask that, but yeah. So thank you for the confirmation. I wasn't sure, but thank you. And I also saw you raise your hand. So.
Yes. Are you actually able to get your business analysts to write those behavior files? I mean, they look like they're not code, but if you're going to suddenly use them, run them through code, they are code.
Exactly. What I've been able to do is have them write me acceptance criteria, and then I translate them. Because I know the dictionary, right? Every step definition is really a dictionary word, right? So when I log in, that's a dictionary that has a definition. When I click on, that has a definition. And so I know that if they say, oh, Susan logged in, that means when I log in, or when regex logs in, and then you kick in with some of the, for me, more advanced stuff. Regex is not my friend yet, okay? We're acquaintances. But using regex in those ways to grab different usernames and stuff like that, so that way that I know what they mean in the test. They don't know. I know. So yeah, it's dicey at best, but at least I'm getting from them, because they understand what I need, I'm getting from them a better version of what I need to do my job than, well, does it work? Are you kidding? I mean, so it does help, but it is not, every BDD ATDD book is like, and then you can have your project managers use given when then. It's like, bullshit, like, it's not gonna happen. But you can nudge change that will help, or at least I've been able to nudge change that will help in my personal experience with that. Yes?
How does it change for responsive and mobile testing?
The question is, how does it change for responsive and mobile testing? For responsive testing, it doesn't change. The thing that you have to be, you can write all the same tests, all the same words. The thing that you have to watch out for in your setup is setting your screen size. Because responsive tests should be able to handle any screen size, but if you have a fixed, if you have fixed non-responsive, that's actually where you run into more problems. Because if you set your screen size not to be full screen, like sometimes I'll set it small so I can run multiple tests in different browsers, and then kind of eyeball them as they're running and get that information. And then I say, oh, something doesn't work, and they're like, well, yeah, we haven't made that responsive yet. So you need to use the full page, the full screen. So responsive stuff actually tends to respond a little better because it doesn't matter, or should not matter, the browser size. The non-responsive things have a lot of trouble. So adjusting the browser size in the environment file is what can really aid in making sure that those tests are passing until a responsive design is completed, or if you're not getting a responsive design, that's understood, and making sure that that's understood within the organization. In terms of mobile, that's a really new space. Appium is the program that I know. I mean, you can use package programs, but I'm talking in terms of open source, which is where that is the space in which I like to work, is with open source software, and I'm a big fan. And Appium has open source testing for native and for web-based mobile applications that they say you can port the given when then steps into their app, and it will run those tests. I have not tried it. Dying to try it. I will be trying it, but I have not tried it yet, so I cannot speak to how it actually works. But that's the possibilities. It's a people have used it, but even the people who have used it kind of note that it's a newer space, and that there's a lot of uncertainty in that area at the moment. Any other questions? Yes?
Are you able to run these tests in parallel?
Mm-hmm. You got two options. Behave has a parallel option. It's not graceful, but it lives. But the easier way to run in parallel is to either locally, if you're not setting up a continuous integration system, locally you can set up a box, set up a Selenium grid, and then set up a number of Selenium instances and have, say, 15 browsers running in each instance. And you can do it that way with Selenium grid. It's not an amazingly easy setup, but it's not super difficult. I mean, it can be done in, it took me a day or two to read through, to figure it out, to install everything, to really understand it, coming from a background of having never done it. So those are kind of two ways that you can do it. If you're running it in parallel in a continuous integration system, it's a similar deal, but in my experience, it depends upon what you're running it against. So the Selenium grid has been a little bit harder to, like in one company, we ran it locally and we ran it against the Linux server we were using, but we were using CentOS, and CentOS didn't like some of the browsers and wouldn't accept certain browser editions, so I was running tests against Firefox 25, like 4 months ago. This was not at Bitly. Let me just put that out there. This was at a prior employment. But I was running these tests, and I said 7% of our users are using Firefox, and Firefox is on version 35. And this is the only browser we have here? Why am I even doing this? But that's okay, I like crickets, they're cute. So it depends upon a lot of DevOps things that you may or may not have, one may or may not have control over. And it depends on their load, like how busy are they, how much can they take on to help me and test, set up browser compatibility, and that sort of thing. So in my experience, it's been, parallel testing has worked really well locally because I have control over the environment, but setting it up remotely has been a little bit more tricky just based upon, depending upon what servers. Much easier against like EC2 as opposed to like a local, CentOS. Yeah.
I'm wondering about how fast it makes test development, because it's a question of what acceptance is, right? When,
Oh yeah.
right? Marketing for final release accepts it, but there's also agile development where you have sprints, and it would really be nice to have the acceptance tests pass as a criteria for exiting the iteration.
Yeah.
Are you able to use that quickly? Are you able to turn the tests that
Yes.
quickly?
Yes. I have not implemented this at Bitly yet. This was my proof of concept to them to adopt the system, so that way that we can start building up. But I was at another company where it was a small company, 15 developers, 1 QA, in-house, me, 2 devs/QAs who were devs in Uruguay. And I had 3 different development teams plus a hardware team where I basically spent Monday in sprint meetings. And I said, I was the most annoying person in the room by far. I know this. That's my job. So every meeting, okay, well this is what we're going to build. I said, okay, well what does it mean when it works? What are the acceptance criteria? Jessica, okay, blah, blah, blah. Okay, next thing, where's this what we're going to build? Okay, is that something I need to worry about? What is it going to be? Jessica, it's not on the front end, don't worry. Are you sure? Is it going to impact the front end? Okay, so, I was the annoying person, but I made sure on Monday that I knew what exit criteria looked like. And I spent Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. I would meet with my Uruguay team on Monday and say, this will stop here. This is what I need from you here. Because I was managing the quality assurance part of that. And so say, these are the things I need you to work on. These are things I'm going to work on. And I was also in charge of manual testing for all 3 of these teams, plus any hardware issues. So I would be, kind of working on it, but because I knew what was needed and had a framework that I was working with, and it wasn't actually as good as this. I learned lessons. So sorry, company for whom I built the first system. But I took a lot of those lessons and, made them improve to here. But, back at that point, I was able to basically, I would test the feature manually, then I would just develop the tests once I knew it worked manually, and I was like, okay, I have something solid to develop against. I know that if I develop the test, they ought to work based upon my manual testing. So then, kind of off I go. And I just did that, and then on Friday, I kind of run everything through, grab Uruguay, and if it looks good, off we go. So it was definitely like a pace. I will not lie. I felt the in that job, but developing a system with the dev team was really, really the most critical thing, and their willingness to answer my very, very tedious questions made it work.
I got a 2-part question. So how often at Bitly do you run your acceptance tests? And say a developer pushes a feature that like a couple hours after the fact appears to break some stuff on the acceptance test. What's the process for how you deal with that, and how you make sure the responsible person fixes it?
Okay, so at Bitly right now, I'm redesigning the entire acceptance test framework. That is what I've been hired to do. That's my main task. So we do not run the current acceptance test. And that's because they are crap. My opinion, IMO, IMO. Okay, I read the code and I was like, dude, what is this? And that's saying something coming from a violinist, right? So, so right now I'm in the process of redesigning that. We have excellent unit testing, excellent integration testing, and excellent test. The development team is very invested in manually testing everything that goes in. So it's really rare, actually, that we have something enter that crashes the system. And I think that that's because in my short time there, what I've seen is that because Billy hasn't had active acceptance test development, or maybe not active, but robust suite, that people have really taken ownership of the quality of their work. So at this point, my goal is to take this, which was my proof of concept for them, and design it out in a way that it is scalable, interactable, developers can interact with that, and hopefully becomes a part of that process. I mean, that is my huge goal. I think I might have time for no more questions. Is that true?
Maybe one more.
What, maybe one more question? Okay, great. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.